So my name is Maryke Luijendijk and I live in Dubai. I've been in the region for about 5 years now. Currently, I work as an education advisor doing various projects for different educational institutions here and abroad. And before that, I was the program director for the executive MBA at the American University in Dubai, where I first helped them in actually launching and setting up the program, and then ran the program for 2 years. So what was really interesting when I moved to the region, before that I was working in education in Europe, was that the industry here is quite young still fairly young, which means it's great in that it's very entrepreneurial, very fast really. Some decisions here that would have taken very long at others with more established institutions where the slowly churning wheels take years for a decision to be made happen very quickly here. And I think it's this sort of out there entrepreneurial spirit that means a lot of very interesting edtech companies are in the region. A lot of universities are setting up new programs. A lot of universities are really growing, so they might start out with just a few programs, and then as they grow, they add more programs. And what's great is that they can do that with a clean slate. So they can really look at what does the market need at this stage, what are trends and topics that might not have been as relevant 5 or 10 years ago, and really embed that in the curriculum, as opposed to some other maybe more established institutions where they just do some add-ons onto the curriculum to reflect these topics and trends. So it was really exciting when I got here to see how fast things happen and how adaptable really they are to what the market needs. So if you are a prospective master's student looking for a master's degree in the region, I think it's very important that you orientate yourself as to what are the different options available, and also where do you want to go with this master's. So within this region, you have different formats or models, if you wish, of master's degrees. So you have your local universities, which means it's a university that was started locally. It's accredited by the UAE Ministry of Education. Your faculty corps will be fairly international, but more from within the region. And that is a master's degree that's recognized locally. Some might have international accreditation, so it's good to check that, but it gives you a very specific type of experience. Then you have some institutions that have international campuses here. And it's good to know that the international campus differs from just an international office in the region. So those that have fully fledged international campuses here, that means that if you were to do the master's here, it will be very, very similar as if you were to do it at the home institution in, let's say, the UK or the US. So you can expect that the services will be fairly similar. The access to faculty will be quite similar. You will join the alumni network, both from the local campus and from the mother campus, etc. So then you also have quite a few international universities that have an office and or a program that they run here. So it's good to look into exactly what that means. Sometimes it means they house the program just within an office facility or a separate building in Dubai, but the experience is quite localized and you might not have all the access to the mother campus that you would as if they were to have a proper international campus here. So it's good to orientate yourself as to what the different options and offerings are. And also super important is to know that there's a difference between educational institutions being recognized by a body that we call the KHDA, the Knowledge and Human Development Authority in Dubai, and the actual Ministry of Education. So any educational program within the region cannot run unless they are recognized and licensed by the KHDA. However, that does not mean that all of them are actually officially accredited by the Ministry of Education. And where it becomes important to look at these ministry accreditations are if you look at something that's called equivalency, where you want to make sure that your degree is recognized locally to the same standard or level as other masters in the region. It needs to have ministry accreditation. Also, if you were to look at maybe going on to a PhD program, you need to have a locally accredited by Ministry of Education master's degree. And also some government, semi-government type of employers also require that your qualifications need to be locally accredited by the ministry. So these are some things to look at. Of course, if you're looking at an international career, some other accreditation bodies might be more important to you, but it's just good to do your homework and make sure you know where is this degree recognized, How is it recognized? And just a final note on that also, does it say which campus you graduated from, or is it an umbrella certificate in a sense that just says the institution name? Because sometimes that's important to some people and sometimes not. Oh, so many. I love the UAE, so I'm obviously biased. I really work with great joy in education in the region. One benefit is what I mentioned initially, that it's very quick, it's very entrepreneurial. So you do have access to programs that are new and fresh, that could be a benefit and an advantage when you go into certain industries. Speaking of industries as well, the industry collaboration between institutions, in my experience, tend to be really, really good. So industries are very much interested in speaking to students, in offering internships, in doing projects and so forth. And there again, because it's small is maybe not the right word to use, but because the economy as a whole is still fairly young compared to some of the very established economies in the world, it's this sort of sense of co-creation that really means that people want to collaborate. A lot of startups, a huge startup scene, a lot of universities have incubators, innovation centers that have ties both in academia and in business. So I think that's really great. And then also, it's such a cliche, but really the multiculturalism here, meeting people from literally countries that you have never heard of, and you have to secretly Google to see where is that country. Really being able to engage with them, to study with them, to learn with them, it opens up a very different perspective. And also something where it might not be top of mind for students, but also the academic side of things. So being in contact with faculty members from different world regions naturally means that you get so much more than just the very much skewed towards one demographic case studies that is very much one-sided in the topics they handle and or the way the case study is presented. So that also brings a very interesting dynamic and different perspectives into class. I think some of the challenges are what we've been discussing, really getting to the bottom of what this degree is and is it a good degree. It is unfortunate that, and there's been a lot done to try and eliminate this, but it is unfortunate that there's still, as in other parts of the world as well, there are still some providers who might pose themselves as offering official degrees when in actual fact it's not. They're not official in any way, they're certainly not licensed, but somehow they tend to still be in the market sometimes. So really making sure that you know what you're letting yourself in for, in a sense, is very important. Another challenge could maybe be, but I think if you do your homework properly, it won't. If you're looking at taking your degree elsewhere, that it might not be as recognized, as would be the case probably if you study in another part of the world and you want to relocate. But again, just doing your homework and making sure that it's recognized. For some very, very local companies, it might be a challenge to not have the local language. Very, very isolated, I would say. It would be very specific to type of companies or type of industries. But if that's an industry you target and a local language might be a prerequisite, you could run into challenges there. Previously, I might have said being able to stay in the UAE post-graduation in terms of visa and so forth. But now there are a lot of initiatives where, especially through startups, where, for instance, innovation centers also have licensing agreements with the government. So students that are part of an incubator or innovation center get a visa as part of the program. There's some freelance permits now available where you can stay and work in the UAE. Company sponsorship is very streamlined and very easy. So that could potentially be, as in other parts of the world, if you're not a local native, could be a challenge. But especially in the last few years, there's been a lot done to try and make it as easy as possible for students to stay. Yeah, that's about it. Now, I'm of course not familiar with every single school or university, but I would say very similar to what you would expect from any reputable institution anywhere in the world, really. So in terms of support in connecting you with companies, career fairs, internship placements, CV workshops, interview cracking, case cracking, these type of services, it's very much a part of the career services and student services offerings from a lot of institutions. maybe coming back to some of the benefits of studying here, you'll find that compared to some of the huge powerhouse universities in the world, here it tends to still be smaller classes. So in terms of the personal attention you get, especially from career services and other student support services, it's very beneficial. I was sometimes amazed at sort of the amount of staff available per student for these type of services. And also here, I don't know if all institutions do it, but I know a lot of them do. Something that's quite novel is that the access to faculty. Faculty all have dedicated walk-in hours where students can literally just drop in and ask questions, which again, if you're at quite a big institution, it might not be as easy. So that is also something that's offers a lot of faculty support and guidance. So, of course, the last year or two, it has been very challenging for everyone all over the world. So I think there are two sides to the answer in terms of how it has affected the education industry. In terms of being able to go on with business as usual, insofar as that was possible, it was fairly streamlined. I think it was, again, this sort of mindset of we will just make it happen. So switching to online, and then as we phased out the requirements and restrictions, switching to hybrid, etc. It was a fairly streamlined process because the infrastructure was there, the manpower is here, and really the mindset to just say, well, we have no choice, we have to make this happen. So that was a fairly easy transition. I think one huge privilege, and that's sort of the other side of the conversation, is that we were in Dubai. I'm speaking only Dubai, not the greater UAE. I can't comment with authority, but here at least, and to a large extent in the region, I do feel that the situation was handled very well. So in terms of restrictions and lockdown, we didn't have very lengthy, extended lockdown periods. Restrictions such as social distancing, face masks, etc., implemented very early. Everyone adheres to that. So it did mean that opening up in different capacities, maybe limited seats, etc., but that was possible because the government was really quite good at handling the whole situation. So as such, educational institutions could follow the lead of the government, and we were privileged that we had sort of freedom is maybe not the right word to use, but less restrictions fairly early on. And we're still, we're now hosting Expo 2020, and that's going very well in terms of crowd control while still adhering to the restrictions. So that's been beneficial for the educational institutions to follow that lead. Also, what was interesting to see is, naturally, as happens anywhere in the world, a lot of students that are thinking of masters will do a bachelor's degree locally and then think of moving abroad for their masters. Obviously, that wasn't possible last year or the year before. So some local universities have really indicated a spike in applications in terms of their master's degrees because of students not having the opportunity to physically travel abroad. But most universities have very strong ties in terms of exchange internationally. So I think for these students, even though they wanted to go abroad, they're now choosing to do the master's locally. They do still have the option to maybe go on an exchange and do a semester abroad that will still hopefully give them that international experience and exposure. So advice that I would give to prospective students is really, really ask your questions and ask them wisely. So any institution you're looking at within this region, really ask to speak to some alumni that have already graduated from this program. Make sure that you know which employers employed people that graduated from this program, because it's so important, especially since there's such an array of different options here. So if you're looking at a master's to go into a specific industry, for example, really ask to speak to somebody that works in that industry that did manage to get there through the qualification, because it tends to be information overload as anywhere in the world, but here also with a lot of information being pushed out. But to really discern as to, is this the right fit? I absolutely advise every student to look into speaking to current students, alumni, and if possible, really visit the campus and or visit the office to get a sense of the look and feel of the program.